Hi there, everyone, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's December 15th. Today, we celebrate the 17th century philosopher and naturalist who was the first woman to make a living from her writing. We'll also learn about the forensic botanist who solved the crime of the decade in the 1960s in Australia. We'll recognize the Herb Society's project that now occupies 2.5 acres at the United States National Arboretum. We'll take a look back at an entry about winter from one of America's most beloved naturalists. And we grow that garden library today with a book that Martin Crawford, the author of Creating a Forest Garden, called a must-read for anyone interested in agroforestry, forest gardening, or utilizing forests for specialty crops. And then we'll wrap things up with the story of a vine discovered by a Harvard botanist and his son as they were walking to a Red Sox game back in August of 1988. But first, I just wanted to take a second to tell you about the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. Each and every Friday, even when the show is on break, subscribers to the newsletter get an exclusive email from me with some super useful content. You'll get helpful reminders and tips for the week to help you grow as a gardener. You'll get a handy list of the featured books for the week from the Grow That Garden Library segment of the podcast. It's so handy. You'll also see a brand new botanist profile and a few hand-picked pieces of botanical poetry that haven't been shared on the show before. You'll also receive plenty of trending garden-inspired recipes, gifts, and hacks. And finally, I like to make the newsletter a little more personal, so you'll see photos and stories about my home garden, in addition to exclusive updates about the show. It's a little behind-the-scenes VIP experience for super fans of the podcast. And don't forget that each week, one lucky subscriber will be chosen as a winner for a lovely gardening book from the Grow That Garden Library bookshelf. And if you enjoy the podcast, you're going to love the newsletter. So head on over to thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org, and sign up for the free Friday newsletter today. Here's today's curated garden news. Today's curated news is from the World Economic Forum, and it was written by Victoria Masterson. And the title caught my attention because it said, "How a few plants in your front garden could boost your well-being." Well, this article is yet one more data point on the power of gardens. And yet, as the article points out, not only are gardens being omitted in new developments, but existing gardens are being paved over for parking. Yet, Victoria reports that the authors of the study believe that it highlights the importance of residential gardens as a resource for public health and the need for gardens to be brought more forcefully into the debates around housing, city densification, and the value of different types of green infrastructure. It's a fascinating article. Now, if you'd like to check out any of my curated garden news articles and original blog posts for yourself, you're in luck, because I share all of it in the listener community in the free Facebook group for the show, the Daily Gardener Community. So there's no need to take notes or search for links. The next time you're on Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the anniversary of the death of the 17th century philosopher, poet, scientist, naturalist, and playwright, Margaret Cavendish, who died on this day, December 15th, in 1673. Margaret's perspective on the natural world helped shape our modern viewpoint. And it should be noted that Margaret was the first woman to make a living from her writing. Yet Margaret has always been an easy target for ridicule. Her points were often lost in confusing verse and the novelty of her ideas. Here's a poem that Margaret wrote that was relatively novel for her day and age. She compared the brain to a garden. And she wrote, "The brain a garden seems, full of delight, whereon the sun of knowledge shineth bright, where fancy flows and runs in bubbling streams, where flowers grow upon the banks of dreams. There various thoughts, as several flowers grow, some milk-white innocence, as lilies show, fancies, as painted tulips' colors fixed, by nature's pencil, neatly intermixed. Some sweet as roses, which are newly blown, others as tender buds, not yet full grown. Some as small violets, much sweetness bring. Thus many fancies from the brain still spring." Well, one of my favorite poems by Margaret is called "The Duchess to Her Readers." In this poem, Margaret shares her appreciation for her husband. Theirs was a love marriage, and William helped Margaret with her work. Here's Margaret Cavendish's "The Duchess to Her Readers." "A poet am I neither born nor bred, but to a witty poet married, whose brain is fresh and pleasant as the spring, where fancies grow and where the muses sing. There oft I lean my head, and listening hark to catch his words and all his fancies mark, and from that garden show of beauties take, whereof a posy I in verse may make. Thus I, that have no gardens of my own, there gather flowers that are newly blown." Virginia Woolf was not a fan of Margaret. In "A Room of One's Own," Virginia wrote, "What a vision of loneliness and riot the thought of Margaret Cavendish brings to mind, as if some giant cucumber had spread itself over all the roses and carnations in the garden and choked them to death." And today is the birthday of the Australian botanist and forensic botanist Joyce Winifred Vickery, who was born on this day, December 15th, in 1908. 1960 was a pivotal year in Joyce's career. In 1960, all of Australia was focused on the building of the now famous Sydney Opera House. And to pay for the construction of the building, the government of Australia held a lottery. A man named Basil Thorne spent £3, a quarter of his paycheck, to purchase the winning ticket. After Basil's win of £100,000, his 8-year-old son Graham was kidnapped and brutally murdered. The crime stunned the country. But ultimately, it was Joyce Vickery's forensic work that helped the police solve the case. In the Graham Thorne kidnapping, Joyce had been tasked with identifying 2 plant particles from the boy's clothing. Joyce recognized them as parts of landscape or garden plants. They were distinctly out of place from the scrub area where Graham's body had been found. Instead, Joyce matched the plant debris to a false cypress and a smooth Arizona cypress outside the suspect's home. And soil scraping showed pink limestone mortar that ultimately matched the mortar on the suspect's brick home. Joyce's work and testimony helped prove that 34-year-old Stephen Bradley had committed the heinous crime. He was sentenced to life in prison. And it was on this day, December 15th, in 1978, that construction began on the National Herb Garden at the United States National Arboretum. Since 1965, a National Herb Garden had been a dream of the Herb Society based in Kirtland, Ohio. After the Herb Society came up with $200,000 for the garden, Congress matched those funds. And so the National Herb Garden was a gift from the Herb Society of America to the American people. Located in Washington, D.C., the garden occupies 2.5 acres of the over 400 acres in the United States National Arboretum. As the most extensively professionally designed herb garden in North America, the garden was intended to inspire people to plant herbs in their own gardens and to use herbs in their cooking. The National Herb Garden comprises annual, perennial, and woody herbal plants situated in 3 sections: a knot garden, a rose garden, and specialty gardens. The knot garden is made up of Japanese holly, dwarf blue cypress, and dwarf arborvitae. The rose garden is a nod to the critical role of roses in herbalism. And finally, the 10 specialty gardens are oval-shaped and have themes. There's the Dioscorides garden. Dioscorides discovered an early version of aspirin when he found that sap from the white willow tree bark and leaves helped with colds, body aches, and fevers. And so the Dioscorides garden grows all of the herbs that were described by Dioscorides. And there's also a colonial garden and a dye garden that grows herbs to color fabric and textiles. And then there's other fascinating gardens like the Native American garden. And there are even gardens devoted to modern botanicals, culinary and industrial plants, as well as fragrance, oriental, and beverage gardens. The National Herb Garden was dedicated on June 12, 1980, and celebrated its 40th anniversary in 2020 during the pandemic. In Unearthed Words, today's words are about winter, and they're from the American naturalist and writer Donald Culross Peattie. Nature in winter is like a great toy shop at night. The doors are locked, and only at the mysterious depths of the shop does some cold light burn. If we press our noses on the pane, we can just make out the forms of bigger objects. All the tenderer delights have been taken from the window, flower and moth and bird. What is there left for us to play with? Winter is a study in half tones, and one must have an eye for them or go lonely. Trees, skies, and even the black, white, and gray and rufous colors of winter birds and little mammals are all subdued, modest, economical, of a lofty beauty. Now one may make friends with owls and mice, with the different colored stems of the willows and cornel and sassafras and spice bush, with winter buds in their furry scales, with the berries that the birds seek out, with the bark of trees and the prints of the four-footed. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Farming the Woods by Ken Mudge and Steve Gabriel. This book came out in 2014, and the subtitle is an integrated permaculture approach to growing food and medicinals in temperate forests. In this book, you're going to learn about forest farming. According to Ken and Steve, forest farming is one of the many agroforestry practices that's specifically focused on growing crops underneath the forest canopy of an existing forest. I love Ken and Steve's book because they teach us new and exciting ways to relate to the forest. This book is an excellent resource for gardeners looking for something new and different to try, especially if they live near a forest or some woods. Ken and Steve share many examples of forest farming. You'll meet a couple who cultivate shiitake mushrooms alongside wild mushrooms in the cool shade of a hemlock forest. You'll visit a delightful forest in February and watch sap get collected from the sugar trees to make maple syrup. These are just a few of the ways that forestry and farming and gardening can go hand in hand. They're not at odds. Since the beginning of time, people have sustained themselves from tree-based systems, and Ken and Steve will help you learn how to return to the forest. Farming the Woods teaches gardeners how to maintain a healthy forest while growing a wide range of food, medicinal, and other non-timber products. This book was the first in-depth guide for farmers and gardeners who have access to an established woodland and are looking for productive ways to manage it. And in case you're wondering, forest crops include American ginseng, shiitake mushrooms, ramps or wild leeks, maple syrup, fruit and nut trees, ornamental ferns, and more. This book is 384 pages of must-read wisdom for gardeners looking to diversify their gardening practices and incorporate agroforestry, permaculture, forest gardening, and sustainable woodlot management. You can get a copy of Farming the Woods by Ken Mudge and Steve Gabriel and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $30. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. The other day, I stumbled on this Q&A that was featured in the Arizona Daily Star. Here's the question. A recent gardening article referred to a form of Boston ivy known as Fenway Park. The writer described it as a sprout from the famed dark green vine that clings to the wall of Boston's baseball stadium. Can you clarify? Perhaps the ivy came from Chicago's Wrigley Field. Well, here's the answer. It says, the ivy didn't come from Wrigley Field, but neither did it come from Fenway Park. Peter Del Tredici of the Arnold Arboretum in Boston said that the ivy came from a building a block or two away from Fenway Park. Peter saw it when he and his son were walking to a Red Sox game in August of 1988. Peter noticed that the top portion of some Boston ivy growing on a building near Fenway was bright yellow instead of the normal darker green. Peter asked permission of the building's owner to take some cuttings from the yellow part, and then he propagated the plant at the Arboretum's greenhouses. Later, Peter asked the Red Sox owners for permission to name the resulting ivy Fenway Park. Peter's Boston ivy species is now bred and sold as Parthenocissus tricuspidata Fenway Park, or Boston ivy Fenway Park. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life. Garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Wyoming, Minnesota with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, Kiana Rayleigh, Maddie Doyle, Natalie Decker, and Eric Begay. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, and listeners always have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. All the stories and books that are featured on the show can be found over at thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. Last but not least, you can share your own gardener greetings on the show by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.